Welcome to part 3 of episode 34, The Dark of the Capital City. In part 1, we looked at the dark history surrounding the castle and the adjacent roads. In part 2, we looked at the various entities that inhabit the stately home, castle, and grounds. In this episode, we're going to step outside of the castle walls and take a look at some of the properties and businesses that have experienced strange and ghostly goings-on. Firstly, as we leave the castle entrance, directly opposite we see St. Mary's Street. This street is one of the oldest streets in the city and is visible on the original map drawn by John Speed. But before we go for a skip and a jump down there, we're going to look at a property that has existed since 1713. Sitting on another of the older streets in Cardiff, Duke Street, is the Rummer Tavern, an ale house that has been on this location since 1713 and has had several facelifts during that time. As with anything that has had multiple facelifts, it ain't fooling anyone. You're still the same knackered old thing underneath. Sooner or later, with the best will in the world, you're gonna start to smell and begin to leak. Enough of my ridiculous humour. I'm just bitter about their latest facelift since it has removed any form of character and you now feel as though you are stuck in a late 90s time warp of Eiffel 65 merged with some sort of medieval inn. Within the Rummer Tavern, however, stories have circulated about a presence lurking in the basement area. Dark shadows seen darting to and fro in the corner of the eye. Barrels moving on their own, and figures lurking in the corner. Some online sources speculate that the spirit is that of a sailor who, after months at sea, came ashore to hear rumours of his wife's infidelity. In a rage, he searched for her and found her within the walls of the tavern. How he died is unknown. A broken heart, suicide, or maybe at the hands of her lover. A short trot now down to the old Howells department store. As stated in part 1 of this series, the building itself dates back to 1867, but the ground on which it was constructed dates back much further and was the home of Bethany Baptist Chapel. As with most places of worship, the chapel had a graveyard. Although I cannot find anything on the construction or removal of the graveyard itself, I do know that it extended into the area where Morgan Arcade now stands, and strange occurrences have been felt. But before we head there, let's take a look at some of the stories from the Howells department store. As stated, the department store grew in size and engulfed a small chapel behind. Several entities have been spotted within the vicinity of the second floor. A man wearing a top hat and looking very unhappy can be seen wandering the stockroom. I wonder if this is James Howell himself, disappointed with the outcome of what happened to his shop. Another famous spirit is that of a ghostly woman in white. It is believed that she was evicted from her home during the construction of the department store in 1867 and died after becoming homeless. I cannot confirm whether any buildings were demolished during the construction, but I can say that this apparition has been seen frequently. Recently, I spoke to a friend of a friend at a stag do who told me of an occurrence when he had been working at the store. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I was well oiled at the time, and so my memory of it is a little bit hazy, but here we go. He stated that one evening he was locking up and had begun the usual bell tolling of, "Would all customers please make their way to the exits?" Or as I refer to it, the "get out you bastard so I can get mangled with my mates" final demand. Either way, customers began trooping to the exits, with staff hotly in pursuit, when he noticed that one customer had slipped the net. An old woman was making her way to the cafe area. He called out to her, but was rudely ignored. A bit annoyed, he called to a colleague who was nearer the cafe and asked them to fetch the woman from out of there and to give her the boot. Like a bouncer with a grudge, the colleague went storming into the cafe but returned looking bewildered and frightened. The old woman was nowhere to be seen, and what was unnerving was that there was nowhere that she could have gone, since the only way in or out was where they were stood in front of the entrance. They packed up and shot off quickly after the encounter. Now, I stated in the last episode that I was still in the process of compiling and investigating stories from Cardiff. There seems to be a great number of stories from the Morgan Quarter. I have spoken to various properties within the Morgan Quarter and a member of staff from the Morgan Quarter management team who has told me one or two stories herself. She has taken my details and is passing it around her staff to find their experiences for me. Makes me sound like some sort of undercover agent, albeit a large one wearing a ridiculous bandana. So I may have to delay that video until I've got my story straight. Having said that, I'll finish this episode by explaining a very strange experience of my own. Many a moon ago, since I'm now old and grizzled, I used to work in a bar opposite the Morgan Arcade. I began working at Reflex 80s Bar at the age of 17 as a doorboy on the till. When I turned 18, I was then thrown behind the bar. To be fair, I loved it. I ended up working every Friday and Saturday, and in some cases, Sunday. It was one of these rare Sundays that this strange tale occurred. Since the staff could not have Friday or Saturday off, they tended to go out for staff dues on a Sunday. We then took it in turns to man the bar whilst the others got sensibly plastered. Sundays were always pretty quiet, and this Sunday was no different. As a result, the deputy manager who was working with me told me that he was going to go upstairs and do something managerial or some bollocks. He told me though that in the rare event that a mass of people entered the bar, he'd be able to see me through CCTV and to wave if there was a problem. Famous last words. I cracked on with the general cleaning of the bar when all of a sudden a herd of Russians came charging in. There were upwards of 30 of them, and I was now swamped. This also meant that the bar was busier than any other place on a Sunday night, and so more customers arrived in the anticipation of a good night. Unfortunately for me, the Russians were buying in rounds, upwards of 30 or 40 drinks each time. I waved and waved at the camera, but to no avail. After an hour of battling, and several barrels requiring to be changed, I stormed upstairs to get him. When I came back down, other patrons who weren't happy about the size of the rounds that the Russians were buying had taken it upon themselves to open their own beers and pour their own pints. Once we kicked them out, we continued to serve the crowd until closing time. The following week, after stocktake, it was found that a number of bottles were missing. When asked about what happened that night by my manager, I explained. They reviewed the footage, and sure enough, there was the Russian invasion of Reflex Bar, complete with me waving like a dickhead, and the subsequent robbing of several fridges after I went to get the manager. When they looked at what the deputy manager was doing, they found him in the office playing on his phone. This resulted in a roasting. However, that was not the only thing that they found on the CCTV. Not long before I burst into the office like a whirlwind, a small translucent figure of a child poked his head up and peered at the deputy manager through the window in the door. Even more shocking, when you think that the office was on the second floor and a code was required for entry. The CCTV outside the staff area and the office showed no signs of anyone accessing the area other than me. That and the odd drunken Russian stumbling past in search of the toilet. Considering that's almost 20 years ago now, unfortunately I don't think I'd be able to find the CCTV. Be good if I could. Anyway, that's all from us here at Dark Entertainment. We hope that you've enjoyed the episode. If you have, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell for all notifications. And especially hit that thumbs up for me, as it helps me to grow the channel. If you wish to get in contact with me, you can leave a comment below, follow me on X or on Facebook, or if you have a story, location, or suggestion for an episode, feel free to email me at dark_entertainment@outlook.com. And remember, stay dark, stay creepy, and always laugh. Ta-ta!